So it's with great pleasure that I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Duke Durham. Duke is a published poet, spoken word artist and rapper. From a young age, he would scribble raps and poems in a book, and that was his way of expressing himself, an escapism to the challenges of OCD. And after being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as a young adult, he was able to describe how the written word was there to help him understand and articulate how he felt. Duke's going to share some of his lived experience with us today and leave us with a performance of one of his poems. So I think we're all just really delighted that you're here. So can we have a clap, please?
Thank you so much, Sarah, for inviting me here today to talk about type 1 diabetes, or as my mum likes to call it, diabetes 1. But as we know, T1D is no joke. My name is Duke Al, and I'm a spoken word poet, author, rapper, and facilitator. I'd like to begin with a poem from my book, Bittersweet, the highs, the lows, hypers, and hypos of living with type 1 diabetes. This is called My Story. I put the cartridge ink in the pen and write about how I am affected. Then I put the insulin in the pen and slowly inject it. Ironic, a poetic diabetic. This may sound funny, I get it, but these last few years have been hectic. Running high in flight for so long, then suddenly I skydived, plummeted. Luckily, my parachute ejected. My pancreas decided to give up, triggered by a salmonella bug which turned septic. A bacterial disease I caught in Bali near the monkey forest, along with things that I was stressed with, dealing with OCD in the final year of my university. Mouth dry, constantly thirsty. As I put the liquid to my lips, I could not help but drink and drink, not realizing I was like a sieve as I urinated and urinated the sugar my body could not live with, diagnosed at 23, type 1 diabetes. I had wondered why my energy had felt so low. I suppose it was the glucose, those symptoms of lethargy. Hyperglycemia that I thought was just feelings of adulthood. All of that sugar that my body could not absorb floating around in my blood. How tired I always was, I mean extremely lethargic. No pump in the gym even when I worked out my hardest. The strangest feeling. I began to lose weight. I never had the faintest idea why. At first I got along with my new lifestyle. I swerved the wrong foods and started eating to preserve my lifestyle. I got used to the daily injections and blood testing. Just 1 month later, I found myself protesting objection. Huge frustration of my newly found diagnosis came with rejection. I was angry. I felt I could not compete as well as I used to when I played rugby. Am I weak? The next stage after rage was neglect. I suffer with OCD and it told me not to inject. Consuming scary amounts of alcohol was my downward fall because I never knew the potentially fatal effects. I was battling mental health and diabetes. Something had to intercept before I destroyed my body in debt as I was taking time away from my life. A year later, I knew I'd pay the price if I kept allowing my health to self-destruct. So I picked back up the pen to reconstruct. I wrote about how I felt, emotion out on the page, and it was enough. I got help, went on the Daphne course, yet days still can be tough, but I am happy I'm here living with T1D. It will never get the better of me. I would like to thank Sir Frederick G. Banting, who discovered insulin, as without him, I would not be here living. Thank you. The reason why I wanted to open up with that poem is because it touches on some topics we're here for today. When I was first diagnosed, I knew frighteningly little about T1D and had to learn fast. I was sent straight up to Landock Hospital by my GP, where the extraordinary caring nurses taught me how to inject insulin, how many units I needed per 10 grams of carbohydrate, and explained what was happening to my pancreas. At the time, I was in the honeymoon period, so I was injecting very little. With all this information, it was on me to learn, understand, inject, monitor my blood glucose levels, and watch out for any changes. A newly diagnosis such as this, with daily injections, often 5+ a day, can be traumatizing and overwhelming. If I was given these booklets, if I was given these informative, easy to read booklets, then I could have read them in my own time as I got my head around my new lifestyle, allowing me to refer to them whenever I was unsure or had questions. We need to be treated holistically. Let me share with you my experience. Alcohol has been a bad influence within my life. It has presented itself as a negative coping mechanism from a young age when battling obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, a heavily stigmatized and misunderstood mental health illness. It continued to taunt me through my teens and early adulthood within various social environments. I engulfed in the dangerous binge drink culture, and being under its influence proved many times to be destructive, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. I mean, there's a reason why the strong stuff is called spirits, right? Consuming spirits, beers, wines have led me to a night behind bars, got me into fights, exacerbated my OCD, where I became aggressive towards myself. You see, the alcohol gave me the confidence to not listen to the intrusive thoughts and fight back. Yet this became extremely self-destructive, leading me to purposely run into the road and get hit by a taxi when I was drunk. I smashed the front windscreen and smashed my face onto the concrete floor. I eventually got the help I needed after that. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, along with exposure response therapy, ERT, which was specifically for OCD. This was completed as group therapy. It taught me all about OCD and how it appears in my life. I gained a new way of looking at my mental health and realized the meaning of the well-known phrase, knowledge is power. Why am I telling you this, and how does it relate to diabetes? Well, a couple of years later, I was diagnosed with T1D. Shortly after my diagnosis, alcohol became a negative coping mechanism again. The binge culture had me back. Self-destruction mode was now a double-edged sword. I did not know how serious alcohol could be if drank excessively, and I found out in quite a frightening way. It is vital that we get psychological support when living with T1D, as both conditions can affect each other. The Daphne course was where I first learned more about alcohol and diabetes, about a year after my diagnosis. Just like my OCD group therapy, I met other people living with the same condition as me. I found this extremely useful, supportive, and was able to relate to them. I was able to connect with them. Relatability and community are so important. It reminds us that we are not alone and that we can learn from each other's personal experiences. I highly recommend the Daphne course to all, even close relatives and friends of people who live with T1D. If I was given these awesome booklets when I was first diagnosed, this would not have only helped me learn about drinking safely, responsibly, and teach me the effects it has on T1D, but it would have aided my mental health, as I would have felt I had more control. I would have felt that my doctors understood how living with T1D can affect socializing. I would have felt less isolated. This booklet alone is extremely important for young and old, whether they are newly diagnosed or not. I believe this booklet and this program can save lives. Knowledge is power. I met Dr. Sarah Ali Rakanya through the organization Artist, who championed the creative work of people living with T1D. Sarah Rakanya is a diabetes consultant in London and now a very good friend of mine. We work together to create Bittersweet. As Sarah is also an amazing artist and created the artwork for the book. I wrote this next poem in lockdown after Sarah challenged me to write a poem for Artist based on T1D. It is called Hidden Hypos and has been shared by Diabetes UK. Hidden hypos. I hide my hypos. I don't want to be seen behind closed doors as the guy who always falls so low, who skives from work until he feels right so. I disguise my hypos. I focus deeply when in a convo as I subtly eat dextrose, waiting for the glucose to reload. I don't want the person to know or think I'm uninterested, so I hide my hypos by acting. I keep control of my cravings, pretend I'm fine, then leave the room silently, inside shaking. It makes me feel weak. I want to be seen as strong, so I disguise my hypos when at the gym. I just say I'm tired and need a drink, wait for the sugar to kick in. People assume I'm just unfit, so I hide my hypos from judgmental individuals who would say something like, oh, he's hypoing again, must not have good control, roll their eyes, think they understand, assume I'm reckless and won't listen to the doctor's advice that I've been given, so I keep it hidden. It's embarrassing, not worth the criticism. I used to be hyper when I was younger. Energy formed within. Now hyper means something completely different. I was lucky I was still living in the honeymoon period. I could feel myself getting real low in a sticky situation. Although it can catch me with a sting, a hypo that's tricky to hide in conversation. As inside I want to go psycho, hulk out, destroy everything. Body in fight or flight mode, craving the sugar my body cannot bin. Ironic, I guess I injected too much insulin. Or didn't account for the caffeine, the burpees, or the sun's heat. I hide my hypos, forced Mr. Hyde to stay within. But now you better hide and give me food. This hypo's uncontrollable. I don't mean to be rude, but I'm in a survival instinct mood. I'm hungry. Thank you. I am just about to complete a creative writing master's that I've been doing alongside working full time, but let me explain more. This time last year, I was employed by my local council. I worked irregular shifts, weekends, days, and evenings as a facilities officer. I would mainly perform grounds maintenance tasks, looking after town council buildings and supervise events. The irony is, I wrote hidden hypos before what I'm about to tell you happened to me. The first stanza of the poem is, I hide my hypos. I don't want to be seen behind closed doors as the guy who always falls so low, who skives from work until he feels right so. I was working at the cemetery one day and the supervisor rang a fellow colleague, who probably wrongly so, answered his phone on loudspeaker. During their conversation, the supervisor was mentioning the work that needs to be done at the cemetery, such as trimming and mowing the grass. This cemetery is on a bit of a terrain, making these tasks even more physically demanding than they already are. I rarely was told what I was doing before getting into work. I would put in a certain amount of background insulin in the morning and fast releasing with my breakfast, then get into work and, for example, be told to trim and mow all day. This happened regularly, and unfortunately, I had a few hypos when working. Yet even when I began hypoing, I would keep cutting the grass and worry the other guys would say something or feel I'm not pulling my weight. I would eventually feel so awful and shaky, I would rush off to sort myself out 20 minutes later, continue the work. The supervisor said on the phone that day, watch out, Duke might pull another sickie again, suggesting I skive off work. Oh, the irony. This was deflating. I later found out that the supervisor had also told another member of staff that I should have control by now. This coming from a man who on numerous occasions when I tried to explain what T1D is, came back or interrupted with his friend's experience who has type 2. There are only so many times you can talk to somebody until you realize their hidden middle name is ignorant. I was unsure of how to handle this. I felt personally attacked and misunderstood. This then affected my mental health. If I had these booklets, I would have been able to know what to do in terms of discrimination. I would have felt supported and not alone. I could have given these booklets to the workplace for them to be educated on T1D and how it affects me. Even through university, who have been extremely supportive, if I had these booklets and this program, I would know that asking for help was normal, that I'm not just moaning or complaining or feeling like a burden on people. Knowledge is power. I ended up going off work with work-related stress. After this experience, it was evident that change was needed. Not all employers understand or are willing to understand what T1D is, but I wanted to at least try. I pushed for change within the workplace, and employees were required to complete race and diversity training, as I had problems from colleagues with that as well, as nobody had had it before, which was quite shocking. The council researched and learned about T1D and wrote a report, and that felt like a win for me, as I left the job shortly after that. Now I'm here talking to you, self-employed, doing what I love, my passion, what makes me get out of bed in the morning, making a positive impact with my words, the best decision I've ever made. I've recently been to the USA twice for 2 of my good friends' weddings. It's been quite expensive. As we all know, the USA is not the healthiest place on planet Earth. I found it very difficult to inject the right amounts of insulin when going out to restaurants, and I often ran high throughout the trip. Every injection was an educated guess. When flying home, I reached into my pocket to get out my insulin pen, and it was not there. I was wearing jeans and sat on an angled chair in the airport. It must have fallen out my pocket. I know what you're thinking, irresponsible. And it was. However, these things do happen. For the nearly 8-hour flight, I did not eat, other than some extra pieces of cheese the flight attendants gave me, who were awesome trying to help. We landed in Heathrow, then I drove back to Cardiff, so I went half a day without any fast-releasing insulin. Now, I know it's not the end of the world, but I mean, it is dangerous, and it did have its negative effects on me. Traveling can bring problems such as these, and you would not even think about them. Again, with these booklets in this program, it prepares you for traveling, for events, for festivals. It is a reminder, a tool. Knowledge is power. I've been trying to get my LGV license for over a year now. The process is long if you live with T1D. I've had to see 2 separate doctors, both with 3 months worth of blood glucose readings. The DVLA, as you know, asks people living with T1D questions about their condition to see if they deem a person is safe to drive or not. When diagnosed, I was already driving, so this was a bit of a shock for me. I completely understand why they do it, but at first I was worried they were just going to take my license off me. This would have provided, again, these booklets and this program would have provided me with key information about driving when living with T1D. It's such an impactful tool. Knowledge, again, is power. Neuropathy and retinopathy are scary complications. I received my first letter that told me there are signs of retinopathy in my eyes this year. It was frightening. I felt quite emotional and worried, yet all I had was this letter. No follow-up appointment or professionals to talk to. So as I usually do, I just took it on the chin and thought about how I can better manage my diabetes to try and make sure my eyes take little to no damage. I remember on alcohol binges when I've woken up with pains in my legs, a heavy, dull ache is the best way I can describe it. I've been worried about this before and feared it was neuropathy. But at the time, again, I didn't have these booklets to educate myself. They would have helped me understand what was happening and ease the worry, which is powerful, as that worry can cause severe overthinking and doubt. Knowledge is power. I cannot express to you how much these booklets in this program is needed, not just for young people, but I believe they can help every person living with T1D, as well as their families, friends, partners, and workplace or place of learning. Newly diagnosed people with T1D should be given these booklets so they can gain better understanding on their diagnosis, which can only help them with their management of the condition. Thank you again for having me here. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for listening. I'd like to end with a poem called Beat. Beat. My heart beats. My pulse beats, a rhythm within me that sparks these ideas, large dreams, a belief, a path seen, a journey with a purpose. If I was heartless, I'd be worthless. I was meant to have to fight, to make a choice in my life, whether to be beaten, left to die, or stand back up, willing to live, to survive. I was meant to write poetry, to perform, to connect. I know it's me, it's my calling, these words that I speak, to relate and educate, bringing comfort, understanding, and peace to those who need it most, to those who feel it close in their beating hearts in which they hold, who used to be ghosts, lost souls, but now do not feel alone. I believe we all have a purpose on this planet. We all have gifts, we all have talents. Find yours, it will naturally beat. We are all unique. My blood flows off beat, but diabetes will never beat me. Thank you very much.
Will you stay here a second and we'll just see if anybody's got any questions?
Yeah. Cool.
Does anyone have any questions? And if so, there is a roving mic, I believe, somewhere, she says. So Nessa's got the roving mic. Did we have any questions?
Not a question, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your experience, because it's so invaluable. I don't have type 1, and as much as I can try and understand, I don't think it can ever kind of fit with the experience, the kind of first-hand experience that you give. So just wanted to say thanks.
Thank you. No worries.
Yeah.
Hiya, Duke.
Hello.
I don't know if you remember me from Daphne.
Oh yeah, of
Yeah.
course. How you doing?
I just want to say how proud I am of you. Oh my gosh, I remember seeing you in the very early days of your diagnosis. I remember you talking about all your performance stuff, and I was like a proud mum then. You've done amazing. Honestly, I wanted to give a big whoop whoop, but well done, Duke.
Oh,
You've done
thank you.
amazing.
Yeah.
Really, really proud.
Yeah, that was fab. Thank you. I can see you've got a book there. I'm just wondering how best to signpost our young people to your work, because I think it's fantastic.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm on social media. I mainly post my stuff on Instagram. And that's at Duke Al Durham. And this book is on it's on Amazon. Just search Bittersweet Duke Al, and it should come up. And some of the proceeds go to Diabetes UK and JDRF UK as well. Thank you. All good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Duke, before you go, I just want to say that, you know, most of us in the room are healthcare professionals, and we are working without living with type 1 diabetes. And I'm always very humbled when I listen to people, I shall get emotional now, to, you know, tell their stories, and it brings it home to us, I think, just how complex and challenging it is to, you know, live with what we deal with, the science and the medical side of it, and we try our best all the time, but it's thanks to people like you sharing your experiences that hopefully enable us to be better healthcare professionals. So thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thank you.